Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here at the Center for American Progress. We have a really important discussion today, Uniform Disservice, How Trump's Agenda Harms Veterans and Service Members. My name is Allison McManus. I'm the Managing Director for National Security and International Policy here at the Center. I'll be moderating the discussion. But first, we're going to hear from Congressman Max Rose. Mr. Rose served as a U.S. Representative for New York's 11th Congressional District from 2019 to 2021, where he served on the Homeland Security and Veterans Affairs Committees, so somebody who knows quite a lot about the impacts on this community. He's also a U.S. Army veteran himself, received a Bronze Star and Purple Heart for his service in Afghanistan. Mr. Rose wears many hats these days, but I do want to highlight that he's a senior advisor with the Vet Voice Foundation. Vet Voice's partnership was instrumental in putting this event together, and so we're really grateful for that. Congressman Rose, I'll turn things over to you to get us kicked off. Thank you.
Okay, I did it. Allison, thank you so much, and to the whole CAP team, thank you for this opportunity. I certainly want to start off by acknowledging the Vet Voice team, several of whom are on the line, most especially Janessa Goldbeck, who's just a phenomenal leader and fighter and advocate for veterans. You know, over the last 6 months, I've felt this kind of very weird thing I haven't felt before, which is, for the first time in my life, how I've felt old. Now, by any kind of statistical metric, I'm not old yet. I'm 38 years old, but this is the first instance in my professional and adult life where I sincerely feel like I have experience with the craziness and hysteria that is before us. Of course, that's because this is Trump 2.0, and I lived as a member of Congress through Trump 1.0. And why do I bring that up? Well, there's some similarities and commonalities between what they did in the first iteration and what they're doing now. Particularly, I want to focus on the tactics. They throw so much you-know-what against the wall that it leaves all of us dazed and confused and struggling to figure out how to respond. That's the case in terms of their foreign policy. That's the case in terms of their domestic policy. That's the case in the ways in which the administration shrouds corruption. But that is particularly the case today when it comes to how this administration is enacting a series of public policies that impact veterans and national security. And I want to go through several of these points and first address them in their isolation, but then most importantly, talk about how they weave together a cohesive narrative that, whether you call yourselves the left, liberal, progressives, whatever else it might be, it is extraordinarily important that Democrats understand that there is a cohesive philosophy that the Trump administration is employing. And upon understanding that philosophy, I think a vibrant opposition can be built to it. So you have, over the course of the last 6 months, what I look at as a veteran, as a former member of Congress, as an advocate and advisor in this space, to be an utter war against veterans and the pillars of national security that we have held so dear. And the North Star of this entire movement by this administration is disrespect towards veterans, towards their service, and towards the current capabilities and stature of our service members. Disrespect, lying. You know, the Trump administration claimed during their the campaign 3.0, in terms of their campaign, Trump repeatedly said, "I love my veterans. I love my veterans. We're going to elevate them, give you the respect that you haven't had before." And then right off the bat, you see Doge. Doge, particularly as time goes on, the Doge cuts were, in retrospect, a war on veterans. 50% of our nation's public servants, federal public servants, our civil service, our veterans. And these are phenomenal people who have served in the past in uniform, often in harm's way, and then proceeded to double down on their commitment to our nation in their next iteration of their career, doing unbelievable things, whether it's at the VA, whether it is facilitating research and development. And never once did Doge say, well, we want to give special credence to our veterans. We want to acknowledge what they're capable of bringing to the table. We want to acknowledge our debt and gratitude to them. That conversation never once happened. It was constantly defensive, obfuscation, and all the like. And, at that point, a part of me, and, I was an ardent opponent of what they were doing during the height of Doge, but a part of me thought, well, maybe this can be viewed within a silo, this disrespect towards veterans and their capabilities and their service. And then you see pledges and promises that the administration will fire up to 80,000 employees of the VA, again, more than half of whom are veterans themselves, but all of whom provide an absolutely essential, irreplaceable service towards our veterans. You see them utterly fine with the PACT Act not being extended, a really monumental bill to be there with modern day healthcare solutions for those who experience ailments particular to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, a conflict that I myself served in as an infantry platoon leader. Now, this story is not yet fully written, right? The cuts haven't fully happened. The PACT Act today is still in place, but very, very, very unclear whether that will be the case by the end of this year. And veterans are frightened. They're scared. Will my services continue? Will I retain my employment? I just saw what they did in Doge. And never once has the administration taken the opportunity to alleviate those fears, to talk about their plan for maintaining VA employment and VA services. The disrespect and the lies have continued. And you go to story number 3, the deployment of active duty service members as well as federalized service members to serve an explicitly political purpose, patrolling the streets of LA during what amounted to, for the vast majority of it, a peaceful protest in LA, an exercise of people's constitutional rights. And in the event that it was not peaceful, something that the LAPD openly said they have under control. Again, the employment of federalized troops for explicitly political reasons, disrespect towards the purpose of service members, towards the oath that they took, an oath not to political leadership, but to the Constitution. You move to storyline number 4, Donald Trump, for the first time in at least recent political history, holding a political rally on a federal military base with service members in uniform behind him, talking about his political opponents, eliciting cheers from those who he has statutory authority over under the code of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And then the last thread of it all, which is this quote unquote big, beautiful bill that is set to cut Medicaid for tens of millions of families. And by any statistical analysis, we'll see hundreds of thousands of veterans lose care that they're receiving associated with Medicare, and millions of veteran families lose care that they are receiving associated with Medicaid. So you see this over 6 months, these different things happening over and over and over again, the shotgun approach. You feel like you're bobbing and weaving and you don't know how to respond. But what I am urging for policymakers to understand here is that this is all tied to a cohesive narrative. It is all tied to a cohesive policy belief. It is all tied to a cohesive philosophy about the world and that is that veterans are not to be respected, that their service doesn't amount to something that is translatable here at home, and that it should not be a priority of policymakers in a zero-sum world of finite budgets to allocate additional funds towards the service, towards supporting veterans when they come home, even after they made a pledge to us. I want to close out just by bringing this back to national security. And again, on this point of disrespect, this point of lying. You compare the record to the campaign promises of I will always uphold veterans. I'll always protect the homeland. I'll always lead with strength and consistency. I believe that the disrespect that this administration is showing the veteran community also can be connected to a patent disregard for the national security alliances and protocols and standards and constitutional protections that have led to America having the strongest military, the strongest alliances, and ultimately the strongest economy the world has ever seen, irrespective of who has been president. We've seen with the recent bombing of Iran a patent disregard for the Constitution and the separation of powers. We've seen in the way in which Ukraine is subordinated to Russia and how the administration is operating, again, a patent disregard towards our alliances. You've seen the same towards our NATO allies. The rhetoric, that disrespectful rhetoric, that disregard for what has worked in the past, and that, again, disrespect for our men and women in uniform, I think is that connective tissue from this administration's policy overseas to its treatment of veterans here at home. So with that, I know I crossed over a lot here, but I do believe it is the connective tissue that binds this administration's policies and that ultimately should form the North Star for the political opposition that it so rightfully deserves. So thank you again for the opportunity to give these remarks, and I look forward to listening on a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Super clarifying. The administration's agenda as a, quote, war on veterans, one that's harmful to service members, veterans, and families, but also to our security as Americans and our strength as a nation. We're going to be delving into these topics a little bit more. And so thanks in advance to our panelists. I also, again, want to thank the Vet Voice Foundation for their partnership in this event. And of course, my CAP colleagues for pulling this all together. We've been doing a series of these events that explore how the DOGE agenda and the Trump administration more broadly has impacted different parts of American society. Some of the other events feature attacks on small businesses, food system, and foreign assistance. But obviously, today we're going to talk about military and veterans. I'm really humbled to be able to moderate. This one's a little bit personal to me. My husband is the naval flight officer for 9 years, and he served in a civilian role for the Navy since separating. We bought our home with a VA loan, so I know firsthand the sacrifices our service members make, how they serve the nation and communities as veterans afterwards. I know the difference that these hard-earned benefits can make for American families, and of course, how all of this has become in jeopardy over the past months. As the Congressman said, the Trump administration's actions are harming this community, whether it's politicizing the military, slashing the federal workforce, the deep cuts at the VA, or forcing this disgraceful reconciliation bill through Congress, which will cut SNAP and Medicaid benefits that many military and veteran families depend on. I'm pleased to introduce our panelists to discuss more, and I have to say, I'm really grateful for the courage that you all are bringing to this conversation. I know that you're speaking not only to sort of abstract policy issues, but issues that impact you in personal ways. And so really grateful for you all being here. We have Greg Bufundo. Greg's a Marine Corps veteran. He was a lead forest ranger and wildland firefighter before being fired by DOGE. Now he's a senior advisor for public lands with Vet Voice, so appreciate all the work that you're doing there. We have Janessa Goldbeck, a veteran of the Corps as well, and now serving as CEO of Vet Voice Foundation. Jonathan Kamens. Jonathan worked with the U.S. Digital Service as cybersecurity lead for va.gov before he too was fired by DOGE, so good company here. And Vicki Walsh, an Army veteran and the co-owner of the Hansel Hill Farm and Orchard. Thank you all so much for being here. Janessa, I'm going to start with you. Vet Voice engages with 1.5 million veterans all across the country on a wide variety of policy issues. So when we talk about Trump administration agenda, what do you hear as the greatest cause for concern from your community members?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Allison. Thanks for having us. Thanks to the Center for American Progress for pulling together this really important conversation. We're honored to be here. So Vet Voice Foundation, we're the 501c3 nonpartisan arm of a group called Vote Vets. We represent almost 2 million vets across the country, military family members and supporters. And right after the Trump administration, right after Trump was inaugurated, we launched a tip line, a DOGE tip line, to hear from veterans and military families about how this administration's actions were harming them, whether that was loss of jobs. 30% of the federal workforce were veterans. At least that was true at the start of this year. I don't know if that will be true next year. And also folks who maybe their benefits or services had been cut or impacted. We received hundreds of submissions right out the gate, and this was before many of the policy positions of the administration had even taken effect. But folks like Greg, who had been recently promoted and thus was in a probationary stage and fired from his job after years and years of service, to folks like a veteran who was a stage 4 cancer patient whose life-saving drugs were provided through the NIH, and when the NIH's funding was frozen, those drugs were cut off. So the frame that Congressman Rose laid out, and so grateful that he could join us today, the frame that he so eloquently laid out, which sort of spoke to all of these things that are targeting veterans, from our services and benefits to our livelihoods to just the way that we see the role of the military in the world and here at home. All of these things are impacting our community. We're hearing from vets who have experienced all of these things at a very personal level, very granular level. And I think it's really important, though, that despite this onslaught, the veterans have really been leading the pushback on these policies. And so I just want to tell a couple of quick stories about some of the ways they're doing that. One is through the courts. Our organization has been really involved in a lot of impact litigation, fighting the administration's illegal firing of probationary employees. We recently won a case alongside our allies at AFGE and a number of other excellent groups who stood up and said, absolutely not. This is not the way that this should happen. They've been fighting back as serving as plaintiffs, individually named plaintiffs in some cases. We had a number of our members who raised their right hand in a lawsuit challenging Musk's illegal access of the Treasury benefits payment system and the exposure of personal information. So, I don't think that there's a lot of people who would feel super comfortable being a named plaintiff in a case against Elon Musk. But we had, veterans raise their right hand and say, "Put me in, coach. Like, this is wrong, and I want to push back." Really proud of that, and not surprised at all to know that veterans in particular would have that kind of courage and moral and personal integrity. We're also fighting back through shaping public opinion. So you've probably seen some of the viral videos of veterans at town halls confronting their members of Congress and saying, like, what are you doing? Why aren't you pushing back? Why aren't you standing up for us? This week, we had a really amazing thing occur, and I'll let Greg speak a little bit more to it, but we saw veterans across the country, a lot of in conservative places, some of whom are people who voted for Trump or support Republicans in Congress pushing back against an attempt to sell off sale over 250 million acres of public lands. And the outcry from veterans, hunters, anglers was so loud and so aggressive that language was actually stripped out of the Senate reconciliation bill, which, considering that this was an issue that brought together sort of the granola left and Ted Nugent, this was a pretty incredible show. And I think that really speaks to veterans' ability to cross party lines when they are out front and advocates, because veterans are one of the last groups in American society that have cross partisan respect and appeal. It makes our voices really powerful when we choose to use them. So I know we're going to get into more of this, but I just wanted to lay those out. I guess the last thing I'll touch on is the domestic deployment of troops and how that is impacting just what the military is. I firmly believe that President Trump is intent on reshaping the U.S. military as a tool of his domestic political power. And he is doing that. He's showing that through his actions, whether it's the military parade, whether it's the rally at Fort Bragg, the highly partisan rally at Fort Bragg, to now the federalization of National Guard against the wishes of local law enforcement and elected leaders, the deployment of active duty Marines into the streets, of an incredibly escalatory and inflammatory measure. And kudos to those service members who have, deployed into this very politically tenuous situation and maintained their bearing. But all of this is an attempt to fundamentally change the way the military and civil military norms in this country. And veterans are incensed by this. I think there's a deep sense of rage around it, looking at the generational harm that this may do to the professionalism of the U.S. military and our ability to fight and win and protect our country. So those are some of the things we're hearing. Those are some of the things we're talking about. And those are some of the things that veterans have been raising their voices on.
Thanks so much, Janice. I really appreciate you highlighting, not just the harms, but also what you all are doing to fight back and some of the wins. As a card-carrying member of the granola left, I really appreciate what you all have been doing to fight back on the public lands. I know that's really important to some colleagues also here at Center for American Progress. And, we live another day now seeing some of that most harmful language taken out of the reconciliation bill. So really great work there. I know we've got at least one question in the Q&A. I want to remind the audience we will be taking Q&A a little bit later in the conversation, but if folks have questions, start popping those into the Q&A function. Also want to remind folks that we do have closed captioning available. There should be a captions button on the bottom of the screen, so if it's easier for you to read, please do so. Greg, I'm going to turn to you. I know you've been really active in this public lands fight, but you also know, firsthand how harmful the Trump administration's actions can be. I'd love to just hear, also a little bit more about you, your service orientation, both as a Marine, as a forest technician, and now with Vet Voice. So I'll turn it over to you. What drew you to these kinds of roles to begin with? How have the cuts impacted you, and what are you doing to fight back?
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Well, as was mentioned earlier, I former U.S. Marine. I was an 0341, a mortarman. I served from 1989 to 1996, Gulf War veteran. So I'm a bit old school in that regard. After I got out of the Marine Corps, hey, it's time to make some money, and I started trying to make some money, and I felt a bit lost. And public lands, in particular, have always been, it's maybe a bit oversaid, but it's a church. And I've always kind of returned to public lands. I've been a climber, a mountain guide. I've been a avid hiker and hunter most of my adult life. And so I wanted to get back into service. And that led me to leaving the construction world and working with a nonprofit and doing, nonprofit work centered around cold water fisheries, which eventually led me to putting a uniform back on and joining the U.S. Forest Service. Pretty late in life, actually. I was 44 4 years old, I think, when I joined a trail crew with a bunch of 20-year-olds, and I went out in the woods and I loved it. I was back to serving the American public. I was back to putting a uniform on, and I was thinking about this morning as I was driving up here. I was thinking about what is it that attracted me to public service again, and it was really, it was very similar to what I experienced in the Marine Corps. This sense of suffering together, this sense of, living in a hole in the ground kind of, and being, getting rained on, and being in the cold and hail, and experiencing physical and emotional stresses in order to achieve something or to support something that's bigger than myself. And so, that led me to getting a promotion and moving into being a wilderness ranger, which is more of the law enforcement side of things. And I patrolled this amazing 500,000 acre wilderness area, with a couple other people, and we kept it safe, and we kept people safe out there, and we kept the animals safe, and we kept the environment safe. And then I took a promotion during the previous administration. It was a Great American Outdoors Act. There was some funding that was available, and I got promoted. I moved to a different district, took the transfer. It got me into a, quote, probationary position, even though I'd been with the Forest Service for almost a decade at that point. And then DOJ came along, and DOJ sent me and, 40,000 other federal employees the exact same letter saying that we did not serve our fellow Americans as we should have, and therefore we were fired. And it was a kick in the gut. I mean, it was absolutely a kick in the gut. It was a betrayal of who we are as Americans. I think this administration really loves sort of the strong man profile, and the president in particular, who's, I don't believe has ever served anybody but his own interests, and his entire life has puts the image of the service member on this pedestal, and then he just betrays them because he knows that these individuals are better than he is. And when he betrays them, that makes him feel strong. And as that kind of pertains to some of these public land issues that we're working on, it's sort of the same idea. These billionaires have everything that they want, but public lands are kind of this great equalizer. And when Elon Musk or whoever, Jeff Bezos, step onto a national forest or BLM land or into a national park, they're just common people like the rest of us. And there is nothing that separates them. And I believe that class of individuals they can't stand for that. And so, they get folks like Mike Lee to try to offload these lands so that they can buy them. I mean, straight up, it's not going to be me. My checking account has about $1,000 in it. It's not going to be me that's going to be buying 250 million acres of public lands. So, I just, I went down this path of I've got nothing left to give, so I'm just going to fight until they try to take it from me. And let them come. I invite this administration to come up my driveway in unmarked cars with masks on and bring it on. I'm I'm tired of it. I'm a total independent. I have never joined a political party, and I've done that on purpose because there was a time, I grew up in the world of, Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, and I believed in a lot of both of what they did, and I served under George Bush, and I remember George Bush when the Desert Storm started. He announced to the American people that that the conflict had started, and I remember specifically, like, he pulled his glasses off and wiped tears away because he was a veteran and he had served in war, and he knew on his command what was going to happen. And this administration and the people who serve at upper levels of this administration have no clue what it really means to be a veteran and to write that blank check to the American people. And I just see this sense of entitlement from, believe it or not, the right of, it's all of these services have always been there for them and for American people, and they don't even recognize what they have and what they stand to lose. And therefore they've taken it so for granted that it has to be bad. I heard it said that Trump 1.0 was cruelty was the outcome of the policy. And now in Trump 2.0, cruelty is the policy. And that is you look at every single thing that they do, and I believe that the Stephen Millers of the world wake up in the morning and they say, how can I be even more mean to people? How can I damage, what the greatest generation built? I think about my grandfather. The guy flew a B-24 Liberator during World War II, and the things that he saw, I can't imagine. And, I never thought in my life that I wish, or that I would be happy that he was gone. And I'm happy he's gone now because he can't see this. He can't see the unraveling of all of the things that the greatest generation, created and built and worked for, Republicans and Democrats alike. So, public lands happens to be my issue, and veterans, public lands as they relate to veterans, and that's what I speak the loudest on. But the veteran is really unique, and veterans are Republicans, Democrats, independents, Muslims, Jews, Christians, immigrants. I'm an immigrant. I hold two passports. I have a passport from Holland and a passport from the United States. And there's a voice in the back of my head that's going, when are the thugs going to come for me for speaking out? And, I'm doing this again to put myself between the danger and my fellow vet and my fellow American, so that I can take the hit, so that they can continue to carry this message and to fight the things that we're seeing in this administration. And, I'm beginning to see the public lands pushback against Mike Lee. The American people rose up, and it was veterans who took the lead on that in many cases. And we showed this administration that if you push us too far, we still have the liberties and the freedoms to fight. And, maybe this idea of, masked men swooping people off the streets, maybe that will be the next public lands. Maybe cuts to Medicaid will be the next public lands. Maybe destruction of our environment will be the next public lands. The issue is just the issue. The empowering thing is what's happening behind the scenes, and that's that Americans are waking up. These massive protests we're seeing on No King's Day, with no violence, no threats of violence. The only threat of violence that day was Trump marching the army through Washington, D.C. and having a bunch of my fellow Marines patrolling downtown LA. The American people are starting to understand that the thing that's more powerful than an authoritarian government is the people rising up. And so anything that I can do to help the people rise up and educate folks that they have a voice and they have an opportunity to create a better world for the next generation, I'm going to do that. But in the meantime, I'm heartbroken. I feel betrayed by the country that I've given so much for.
Thanks for sharing that, Greg. As much as I hate to stick with the theme of betrayal, I think it's a really apt description for a lot of what we hear from veteran and active duty service member community. And I also, I think your point about how, this is a community unto itself, but also enmeshed in so many other communities throughout the country, geographically, demographically, et cetera. And so, Vicki, with that, I'm gonna turn to you. I mean, we are seeing not only the cuts to the federal workforce, but also, already cuts to federally funded programs. We've talked a little bit about massive cuts that we're expecting at the VA. I wonder if you can share what the impact of this has been on you, and particularly you as a small business owner, as a farmer, and as a mother. I mean, how is this impacting you and your family?
Yeah, thanks for having me here today. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to speak and be heard. In addition to being a veteran, I'm a federal employee who's coming to an unexpected end of my federal career by DOJ as well. And this kind of put my VA benefits into a necessity for me more than a nice to have. I really thought I was kind of untouchable, being an Iraq war vet, a disabled vet, having 25 years of service, soon to be retired from the military. I'm to the point now where the only thing I have left are my VA benefits. I'm losing my health care. I'm losing my job. The farm that we have is our sole source of income now, and that wasn't something we projected to be able to sustain our family for at least another 5 years. And so we're scrambling now not to lose our farm, to not lose the last thing that we have. And it's really devastating because this story is so familiar. It's not even special. It's happening all over the country, and I hope people understand the gravity of what's happening here. I am a mother. I have 6 children. I have a daughter who's in college right now, planning to use part of my GI Bill to graduate. And the uncertainty of that's very scary for her. She doesn't deserve to go through that. I want her to live her best life in college and have fun and not wonder whether or not she's going to have another semester under her belt. My VA healthcare, I've been earning that since I was a little girl. I am a survivor of being poisoned at Camp Lejeune from the tainted water that was, exposing me to gasoline as an infant. I was exposed to VA, the burn pits downrange in Iraq. Those things I've earned, and all I'm asking is to keep those benefits, because I don't really think it's right that the damage that's been done to me inadvertently or due to my time in service should be degraded in any sense at all. The thought of losing that health care, which is now going to be my only source of health care, is scary. I don't think I should be expected to even cover a deductible or a copay for cancer I may end up having later in life as a result of the things that I've been exposed to. I don't think that's right to ask of people. I've come from a long line of veterans. My grandfather fought in World War II. My grandmother was a nurse. My dad is a retired Marine. I'm retiring from the Army. And we're proud of our service. We're proud of the things that we've done to keep our country secure. It's something we've taken very seriously. And it's something I want to empower my children to consider one day as well, because it's been so beneficial to me up until basically right now. It's set my whole career up, my whole path for myself. It's been something I've been super proud of, being a part of a community of people who really down to their core care about other people. You know, it's a position of service, and to be treated like that wasn't something special is hurtful on a lot of different levels. And I just want to make sure people understand, you know, what's happening here isn't just to one or two people. It's happening all over the country. You know, the 80,000 people that are being cut from the VA are losing their jobs, but it goes so much more beyond that. You know, it's affecting their children. It's affecting their way of life. It's affecting the way that they buy things from small businesses or take vacations or fund the economy. You know, that's going away. And then you have all of these service members who have given everything. Since I joined the military as a teenager, and I've steadily provided service to my country, either through the military or as a federal employee. And within 4 months, that was stripped away from me. And I know my time mattered. I don't care what Doge has to say or Trump has to say. What we've done is important. And I think it's important to make sure everyone remembers that and understands that and gives back to the veteran community a thank you for that, and not make them feel like they weren't important, that the sacrifices that they made and their families made weren't important. And so, you know, I hope that speaking today does something. I can't thank you guys enough for organizing this and inviting people to talk, because there needs to be a loud voice. I know that we're marching and organizing. It's just disheartening to feel like it just keeps happening no matter what. You know, like everything we're doing, you know, people are still being fired. People are still losing everything, their livelihood. My entire farm, I may not have next year. It's really devastating on a lot of different levels for a lot of different people.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vicki. Thanks for sharing that. And I think it's such a critical reminder. I mean, what you are asking for, it's not charity. This is not necessarily, you know, it's not asking for a handout. These are benefits that are earned, that there is a relationship between the service that you provide and the well-deserved and you know, really what's your right to be able to have access to healthcare afterwards because you put your body on the line. That was the point of the PACT Act. That's now under threat in so many different ways. And that, you know, it's not just for those who served. I know we have at least one audience member, Donna, who asked a question, you know, is concerned about her spouse who's disabled. So there are reverberating effects when you are not able to access the kind of care you need, or that benefit is in jeopardy. And appreciate also, you know, the generational concern. We know that so many service members choose to serve because they've seen what service means in their family. And if that comes into question, then I really worry about what this means for our national security moving forward. If we have a whole next generation that doesn't see the value or doesn't feel valued, you know, that they would take on this service role. So, Jonathan, I'm going to turn to you because, of course, undergirding a lot of these actions from the Trump administration is this false claim that they are acting in the interest of combating waste, fraud, and abuse, that this is just about, efficiency. This isn't intended to be cruel. But of course, you had like a front row seat to understand, what did the Doge agenda look like in action. So I wonder if you can share a little bit more of what you saw about your experience. What were you doing? What kind of work were you doing with the VA? How do you think the Doge agenda affected efficiency at the agency? And then I know, just because your expertise is in cybersecurity, if you could share, a little bit more about the impacts on security for veterans too.
Absolutely. Let me start by saying thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be in the distinguished company. I'm apparently the one panelist who is not a veteran, and I did serve in the federal government for a year and a half before Doge let me go, but I don't think that holds a candle to the people who have served in the military. So I want to thank you all for your service, and thank you for including me in this group. So I was employed by the U.S. Digital Service for a year and a half, and I was detailed to VA, where I served as the information security lead for VA.gov. And I want to comment on this whole idea of waste, fraud, and abuse. So the U.S. Digital Service and 18F, another group that Doge has eliminated, were both dedicated to cutting down waste, fraud, and abuse in government, to modernizing government, to making government more efficient. And one of the first things that Doge did when they came into power was to gut U.S. Digital Service and completely close down 18F. So that's not the act of an entity which is actually trying to cut down on waste, fraud, and abuse, because they fired the people who are already doing that. So I really think it's important to be clear and unequivocal that cutting down on waste, fraud, and abuse, it's just a lie. So a lot of people make this mistake of hearing people tell us exactly what their terrible goals are and exactly what they're going to do to achieve them. And then they choose instead to believe the lies that those people tell as a cover story. We can't keep making that mistake about the Trump administration. They just no longer deserve the benefit of the doubt. I think they've proven that. We need to recognize what we're up against to understand how important it is for us to fight back. The reason we know that waste, fraud, and abuse is a lie is both because of what I already mentioned, because Doge came in and started cutting parts of the government that were already cutting back on waste, fraud, and abuse, but also because the administration and its advisors have been telling us that that's not what they were really trying to do. Grover Norquist told us, Steve Bannon told us, Russell Vought told us, Steve Miller told us, Elon Musk and Donald Trump told us. I mean, this goes back to Newt Gingrich. He told us the path that we're on now starts that far back, maybe even farther back than that. So what Doge and the administration are actually trying to do, what they've told us they're trying to do, is three things. Number one, they're trying to destroy effective governance in this country. Number two, they're trying to make themselves and people like them richer and more powerful. And number three, they're trying to hurt people who aren't like them. I really think it's just that straightforward. And I think there's endless evidence of what I'm saying, but since our time is limited, I'm going to focus on my personal expertise, which is information security. And so I'm going to give some examples. Doge has spent the last 5 months methodically demolishing the walls protecting sensitive data about individual Americans held by many agencies throughout the government, in clear violation of the Privacy Act and other federal laws and regulations. What they're doing is clearly illegal. Now, we can certainly envision a scenario where breaking down walls would help the government better serve the public, but why should we believe their lies when the truth is staring us in the face? What they're actually trying to do by centralizing access to data and compromising all those data silos is to make it easier to use government data to target their enemies, and easier for that data to be used for other nefarious purposes, both inside and outside government. This isn't theoretical. We've already seen it play out. For example, the administration took the unprecedented and probably illegal step of marking thousands of living immigrants dead in the Social Security Administration's death master file, with the explicit goal of destroying their ability to participate legally in the American economy, forcing them to self-deport. Also, the administration is openly using IRS data to target immigrants for arrest and deportation in clear violation of federal regulations. Immigrants have been assured for 50 years since the Privacy Act was passed that they can safely pay their taxes without concern that the data they submit to the IRS will be used against them. the Trump administration is just tossing that out the window with no regard for laws, regulations, or civil rights. I want to make it clear that I don't think the administration is going to stop at using data to go after immigrants. Many government agencies, including VA, have data which can be used to target trans people. Given the administration's openly weaponized transphobia, it's only a matter of time before the administration progresses from forcing trans people out of public life to actively pursuing them using that data as a foundation for their pursuit. I'm also extremely worried that immigrants and trans people aren't the only ones at risk. Through his comments about treating blue states differently, Trump has made it clear that he will not hesitate to target anyone he considers an enemy. We're all potential targets. Every authoritarian state uses massive surveillance and dossiers on citizens as essential tools of control. The Nazis had IBM and the Trump administration has Palantir. The people may have changed, but the goal remains the same. As an information security professional who knows a thing or two about history, I'm not just worried. I am, frankly, terrified.
Thank you so much. That was chilling, I'd say, but also, it's really good to be able to hear from you directly, that you have direct experience on what it takes to make systems run more efficiently and can separate signal from noise on, where we're seeing good faith efforts to make agencies run better and where these are actually bad faith efforts to weaponize them against the American people. I'll remind folks, if you do have questions, to drop those in the Q&A. We've had one question on just concern around benefits that may benefit spouses. So this is one specific to dependency and indemnity compensation. I think it raises this question of confusion, of anxiety, of fear, not knowing perhaps what programs and services may come under the chopping block. And I think particularly as we're looking ahead to potential cuts at the VA. Janessa, I'll turn to you. I mean, is there something, I know we may not have an answer specifically now on what programs will be impacted, but, as we are fearing what these cuts might look like, can you speak a little bit to what anticipated impact might be at the VA?
Yeah, I don't have a specific answer on DIC benefits, but I'll just say broadly, we should be deeply concerned about all benefits and services because the administration has proposed such drastic and draconian cuts to the VA. 80,000 employees is a quarter of VA employees. And last week, Secretary of the VA, Doug Collins, was testifying on a budget panel and was asked, this is the opportunity he has to show the Senate his proposed cuts and explain them. And Senator John Ossoff asked him, well, who's actually on the chopping block here? Which staff are you cutting? And he couldn't answer it. And that's part of the strategy, is to obfuscate and say, oh, it's just non-essential stuff. There is no non-essential staff in a healthcare system. The person who answers the phones and schedules, is an essential person. The person who makes sure the environment is clean and safe is an essential person. The security guard who makes sure that the parking lot is safe is an essential person. And not to mention all of the medical staff and mental health staff. So I think we should all be concerned. I'm a VA patient. I go to the San Diego VA. It's excellent. I have excellent care there. And beyond the, impending cuts and how that will impact people's ability to do their jobs, it's just the morale hit on folks who are feeling extraordinarily anxious. I always wear my merch, our Vet Voice Foundation merch, when I go to the VA, because people recognize it and they talk to me because they know where I stand on these issues if I'm wearing our gear. And I think it's a pretty unusual experience to have everyone in your care team pull you aside and express how anxious and fearful they are. Like, that is not a normal interaction between a patient and a doctor or a nurse. And I mean, it breaks my heart to see, a lot of these folks are veterans themselves, but there are also civilians who, maybe they come from a military family or they just felt a call to serve this population specifically, who are being tossed aside and, told that they're worthless or lazy government employees. And that's just the VA. Veterans interact, as Vicky so eloquently laid out, interact with the federal government, and Greg did as well, in a variety of capacities, whether it's contributing to feeding our nation or taking care of our public lands or fighting fires, to all of these different areas that they're cutting and slashing, to ensuring that people are peaceful and prosperous overseas so that we don't have to go fight those wars ourselves or respond to wars. All of these things are on the chopping block, and all of them are at risk. And so there are so many stories out there of people saying, I didn't think he meant me. I didn't think he meant my farm workers were going to be deported. I didn't think he was going to terminate my employment or shut down my rural hospital or end the prosthetics clinic at my VA because it was focused on women, and so we need to tell these stories over and over and over again in places that people's eyeballs actually are. So that means, social media. It means being equally aggressive about putting people like Greg and Vicky and Jonathan into the public space so that people can actually understand at a very tangible level what's going on. 80,000 jobs, that's a big number, but what does it mean? And so I hope that we can continue to have conversations like this, and really want to thank CAP for platforming all of us so that we can get more of these stories out into the ecosystem.
Thanks so much, Janessa. We've got about 10 minutes or so left. I want to take moderator's privilege just because I know we've focused quite a lot on the administration's slash and burn approach to government, what that means in terms of impact on veterans. But actually, I want to return to something, Janessa, that you mentioned in your first set of remarks. There's the fundamental changes to civil-military relations that we're seeing, the way that the military has been politicized in many ways, whether this is through like the anti-woke agenda, the sort of reframing of what it means to be a warfighter, or the firing of the JAGs. I mean, there's been a number of ways that we've seen the military politicized. I feel like I would be remiss with this panel not to ask for your perspective. So I'm just going to open this one up to anybody who might be interested in responding. I mean, particularly as folks who served either in the federal government, served in military, or both. What's your take on Trump's approach to the role of commander-in-chief? What's your perspective on the state of civil relations right now?
I'd love to just jump in real quickly and then pass the mic, but I just wanted to, my military service, I joined the Marine Corps when I was 26. I worked as a human rights advocate on civilian protection in conflict zones, and saw firsthand why it was so important to have military forces to provide security and help stabilize some of the places where our humanitarians were operating. So kind of a circuitous route into the Marines, but I joined in 2012, and when I signed my contract, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was still in place. By the time I commissioned as an officer, I was part of the first class, or maybe in the first couple of classes where Don't Ask, Don't Tell had been officially repealed. So I was able to serve openly, as myself, which made a lot of difference, and it also didn't matter at all, to the troops I was serving alongside. When I joined the Marine Corps in 2012, I wanted to be an infantry officer, and I was stunned to find out that there were certain jobs in the military that were closed to women, specifically on the basis of gender. Like, how could this be true in 2012 that the federal government could not even allow me to compete for a job? So when the Marine Corps announced that they were doing some testing on whether or not women could successfully integrate into combat arms units, I volunteered for that experiment. And then I worked behind the scenes with a number of advocates who were seeking to overturn that policy, women who had flown combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, logisticians who had led convoys that had been hit by IEDs and or attacked and returned fire, who had earned combat action ribbons, but technically were not allowed to be in combat because of the combat exclusion policy. And we were able to successfully, not taking credit for that, but the coalition of people working to change that were able to successfully open all jobs in the military to anyone qualified to do them, regardless of gender. And now you've got, folks who've graduated, many women who have graduated from Ranger School and have become tank officers and doing all these tough, dangerous jobs that, by the way, most of America doesn't want to do, and doing them well and honorably and successfully. So I see, I take it extremely personally to see this president, this administration, this Secretary of Defense denigrate the service of women, of people of color, of trans people, of LGBTQ people, attacking everyone who doesn't fit their 1970s comic book version of what the military is. It makes me so angry and so frustrated to know that there are people in uniform right now who are just trying to do their jobs, And the leadership of this country is saying they're less than and actively finding ways, whether it's, the trans ban, or they just announced a new policy in the military that specifically targets Black men. Some Black men have issues shaving every day because of the way hair grows on their face. And so there are exceptions to the shave policy that allow them to serve with a beard. A neatly trimmed beard has nothing to do with their jobs or their performance. And they're overturning that policy, which will mean that a number of Black men in uniform will have to get out. I mean, what are we doing? And that's just on the woke piece. That's not even talking about all the other things that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, I take it really personally. I think anyone who has served next to somebody who's different than them, comes from a different place, looks different than them, has a different religion or creed, and it doesn't matter. We all are in service of this bigger mission. And so for them to pick it apart and try to pit us against each other and make the force an all-white Christian nationalist, Trump loyalist force, it's disgusting, and it is so anti-American.
Thanks so much for that, Janessa, really well said. Just because we are getting to the end of time, I want to make sure that all the panelists have a couple of minutes just to wrap up. Any parting thoughts? Feel free to reflect on the question of Trump's record as commander-in-chief, or any other parting message you want to leave our audience. Jonathan, I'll turn to you first. You're muted, Jonathan. Make sure you get off.
Sorry about that. Sorry about the cat as well.
Never apologize for your cat.
Every veteran who served or is serving took an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I took that same oath on my first day at the U.S. Digital Service, although I'm not, frankly, comparing my service to the military service members we have here today. I truly believe that our Constitution stands on the edge of a precipice. And we have a choice. We can sit on the sidelines like so many have done throughout history, or we can stand up and fight for our democracy and our future. I think every one of us needs to be thinking right now in a very concrete way what our answer will be when future generations ask us what we did in this moment. And the reason why I'm here today and the reason why I'm doing other things to push back against the administration is because I, for one, refuse to be a bystander. And I think that's a decision that we all need to make.
Thank you, Jonathan. Vicki, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to any member of the military that might see this video one day and just offer some words of encouragement to stay and fight. It takes a level of bravery to be in the military. I've been trained my whole life that the First Amendment was something I fought for, but not something I was entitled to. That was drilled into me my entire career. It's not easy to be in this position, but if we all leave, the only thing left is going to be the wrong type of people in the military. And there are people fighting for you right now to undo what's being done. Hang in there. Don't be afraid to speak up. I have always tried to be polite and cordial in my presentation. When I find something wrong, I want to speak up. And sometimes I've even bit my tongue for the sake of my career or my livelihood. I didn't always speak up when I should, and I lost it all anyway. And so, I speak to you as a fellow service member. We have a long, hard road ahead of us, but don't give up. Do what's right. The military rules well enough to defend your country in the right way. And so don't lose sight of that. You are important, and the work that you are doing is important. And there's a lot of people rallying behind making sure that we continue to have a good, strong military force, and that they're treated in the way that they should be.
Thanks, Vicki. Greg, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to encourage my fellow servicemen and women to just not give up hope and understand that yeah, there might be a bunch of Marines in downtown LA right now, probably bored out of their minds, sick and tired of eating MREs and walking across the street to McDonald's to pick up a couple of Big Macs or whatever. I mean, from what I've understood, it's just, pardon my French, a bunch of grab ass that's going on down there. It's just designed to intimidate the people that stand against this president, and they're bored out of their minds sleeping on floors. But, don't give up hope. The light comes after the darkest hour. I think that folks and both, everybody has a voice. Everybody has a voice, whether it's doing something like this, whether it's serving in a different capacity, whether it's just trying to have an open conversation with somebody that you disagree with. We all, as Americans, have an opportunity to change the course of where we're headed. And Jonathan said that he feels like we're on a precipice here, and I have to agree with him. The razor's edge that we're on right now, between falling completely into authoritarianism or a functional democracy, is really, really fine. And, I hope that things like these will encourage, my fellow veterans and fellow service members to start doing small little acts of patriotism and defiance, whether it's, slapping up I did that sticker on a gas pump somewhere, or whether it's, I thought of a great protest we could start doing is taking out an American dollar bill and crossing out the E pluribus unum on it, as just an act of protest. Everybody has a voice. And I hope that members of Congress will begin to wake up and see that unless this administration is not planning on giving up power in 4 years or 2 years, that all of this stuff that's happening will just will push back. It'll change again. Change is the only constant. And so that therein lies my fear of what Jonathan said, that this administration has no intention of giving up power in 4 years. So speak out, act out, protest how you feel comfortable. If you're a Lance Corporal standing there in downtown LA, just have faith that this will change. That MREs you may feel like an MRE is forever, but it really isn't. They eventually pass, as will this administration.
Thank you so much, Greg. I really deeply appreciate you all leaving with us with that message of hope, and with that message of fighting back. I know sometimes it's a platitude to say thanks for your service, but genuinely, like from the very depths of my heart, as an American and the wife of a veteran and as an advocate, I'm really grateful to you all for your service in or out of uniform, and really proud to continue this fight alongside you. Thanks to our audience as well. The event will be available on our website, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon. and more fights on the horizon.
Thanks.
Thank you.